Good morning, everybody. My name's Kerry Duval, the Warrior Queen. I'm back for another episode of An Audience with the Queen. I've got another amazing guest lined up, so we will see you in about 30 seconds. Welcome to MH Warrior TV, Ben.
Good morning.
How have you been?
Good, how are you?
I'm all right, thanks. So previously we've spoken about SEN and how it affects being an SEN parent and how it affects mental health. We've spoken to Rebecca Fallon, who is an amazing mum, and now I wanted to see what it's like from a dad's perspective. So we've asked Ben to come along and talk to me about being an autistic dad and how he deals with it and how he co-parents with his child's mother. But first off, because you're brand new to the show, we're going to ask you a few quick fire questions. So okay. What's your favourite colour?
Red.
Yeah, red. I like red too. My favourite is purple though. Okay. If money was no object, you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Italy, specifically in Tuscany.
Any particular reason?
I was there as a teenager, and it's just a beautiful place. I really enjoyed it there.
Brilliant. Okay. And does pineapple belong on pizza?
That is entirely up to whoever is eating it.
Yeah, I like that. I like that answer. Most people say yeah. Some people say no. That's a good answer. So I'm going to kickstart with you yourself have got autism.
That's correct.
Yeah. So how did you find being diagnosed with it first?
The diagnosis process itself was difficult. I'm in the United States, in New York, and I don't know that much about the system where you are. Mm-hmm. A lot of stigma around mental health here, and there's a lot of therapists often aren't helpful. They don't necessarily engage with something about health. But once I was able to get the diagnosis, it's actually been really helpful to me.
Yeah. Yeah, because in Britain, I don't know too much about the adult system of diagnosis, because I've not dealt with it. But with children, we've got to go and see the doctor, who then refers you on to paediatricians, and then the paediatrician does a report and refers on to several different people around you, and then you end up with lots of reports for your child. And then it goes to a panel process to say yes or no, the child has autism or not. So it's a long drawn out process.
In the United States, or at least the way I went through it, is I went to a therapist who then referred me to a neuropsychologist who put me through a series of tests. The problem is there aren't that many doctors who do those kinds of tests. Yeah. And the therapists aren't necessarily eager to refer you for whatever reason. For children, it's usually the child's pediatrician that sends you on to a therapist who sends you on to. It's not quite as convoluted as where you are, but it's convoluted enough. Yeah.
So it was a long, drawn-out process for you too.
That's correct.
Yeah. Now, obviously, I want to move on to your child. So, how old was your child when she was diagnosed?
She was probably 4 years old when the pediatrician first brought it up, and then we got the preliminary diagnosis very shortly after.
Yeah. And how long does the process take in America from getting that first pre-diagnosis, as we would call it, to the formal diagnosis?
It can take several months, depending on how fast, how quickly you're able to get appointments and things like that, and on your insurance and all that stuff.
Yeah. With us, it takes up to about 12 months, maybe 18 months.
Yeah.
It's just a case of how long it takes certain professionals to do the reports and get them back to the parents, and that can be a process in itself.
It was also part of the reason why it was relatively late for her and why it took as long as it did was that she's like me. She speaks, she makes eye contact. She's apparently, a typical child. You have to interact with the child somewhat before anything becomes evident.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you and your ex-wife deal with that process?
I was pretty accepting of it. And in my case, it was the kind of thing where it seems to run in my family. So it actually explained a lot about other things that have happened in my relatives before. My ex-wife struggled with it quite a bit more. She wanted to have kind of a perfect normal family, and that didn't happen. So it was a lot more of a challenge for her.
Yeah. So would you say that the whole process of finding out her child might have autism, and then going through all that process, all these different professionals coming in, doing reports, doing assessments, would you say that affected her mental health?
Yes, it definitely stressed her out a lot. And also, so some of the kinds of things that autistic people do, for example, I don't pick up very well on nonverbal cues. It's not that I don't care how other people feel. It's just if somebody doesn't tell me, you're making me uncomfortable, or I want you to do something, I don't know. I don't necessarily read it in their facial expression or their body language.
Yeah.
And people often take that I don't care, which isn't true. So a lot of those kinds of things that had come up between her and I were now coming up between her and the child. So it was, I think there was some guilt associated with it for her, because she was realizing things she had been mad at me about weren't actually my fault.
Yeah.
So it was a very complicated situation. And then there was of course, the issue of, how much is that going to affect the child? Will the child be able to finish school and work and normal, healthy life?
Yeah. I think naturally all parents want that, don't they? They want their child to be able to go through school as normal as possible, and then when at the end of school to be able to go into whatever job they choose to do and have a successful life. That's just normal parenting. But then when you throw autism in the mix, it's I don't know about you and your ex-wife, but when I first heard the words autism with my son, I thought, oh no, he's not going to be able to have that sort of life. And lots of negative things were going through my head.
Right.
Yeah. And then obviously I started doing research. So is that a similar thing to you?
Yes, and I was fortunate that I just happened to know a few other people who were on the spectrum, and they sort of steered me toward my own diagnosis. And really, I think what I would say to any parent or anybody who thinks they might be autistic, ADHD, or anything really, a diagnosis isn't something to be afraid of. It doesn't end your life. It can be very helpful. And in my case, part of the reason why I decided to seek diagnosis, why I decided to go through the process for myself, is that in the United States, autism is something your employer has to make reasonable accommodation for. So it's actually something that I had not experienced success in my career, partly because of those problems with social interaction that held me back. And something very similar happens when you have a child in school. If your child is undiagnosed and they're just sort of doing the best they can and the school is doing what they do, your child's going to struggle a lot. Whereas if you have a diagnosis, you can request, in America, it's called an individualized education plan, an IEP. You can get that for your kid, and you can get sorts of accommodations to help them succeed.
Yeah. In Britain, we have IEPs, and then all the IEPs obviously bring in little bits of support, but then we work towards an EHCP, which is Educational Healthcare Plan. So even that's a long drawn out process. That can take 12 months to get an EHCP. So there's different professionals that come in and do more assessments, more reports, and just dealing with all the professionals and attending all these appointments can be stressful in itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how have you and your ex-wife dealt with taking your child to all those appointments?
For the most part, my ex-wife has been able to deal with it. We've been kind of fortunate. She's a college professor, so
Yeah.
she has a schedule where she can sort of work around appointments, and I tend to work somewhat odd hours also, so it hasn't been too terribly challenging in that regard. But yeah, if we were both on 8 to 5 working schedule, it would be a nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be. And obviously that's another thing, that's another challenge that parents deal with is sometimes when a child is diagnosed with autism or any disability for that matter, one of them would maybe have to quit their job to be a stay-at-home parent. So then the financial burden falls on the other parent to basically provide for the family. So can I just ask, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, was your child having autism a factor in your divorce?
I don't think so. I think me being autistic was definitely a factor in the divorce,
Yeah.
but the child wasn't. Anything, yeah, because we were married, we had to stay together for the kid.
Yeah. No, the only reason I asked is because obviously that financial burden of providing for it can actually impact the family splitting up. I mean, you hear of it happening. I'm actually glad it didn't happen in your situation, and you've been able to co-parent brilliantly, from the sounds of it.
In our situation, my daughter, most of her development proceeded normally, as far as like speech and walking and potty training and all that kind of stuff. So I we're in a more severe situation where she's nonverbal, she has some of the other kinds of issues you hear about, then I'm sure it would have put more of a strain on the marriage, but that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
It can be a little bit awkward when you talk to people about autism, and like when I talk to people, when people find out me being autistic, they'll often say, me or my child, you don't look autistic. And autism doesn't look like any completely different. It's broad spectrum. It used to be that there were terms like Asperger's syndrome and pervasive developmental disorder that were used to sort of break up. The problem, what I've gathered talking to other autistic self-advocates, is that the problem is if you were diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, people would say, oh, you're very mildly autistic, you don't need any accommodation. So then they would go through life struggling with nobody helping them or nobody accommodating for them. And if somebody was diagnosed with pervasive developmental disorder, it's also sometimes called level 3 autism, the attitude was, oh, this person is essentially a lost cause. All we do is try to make them comfortable. And that's not necessarily true. Even people who are nonverbal, some of them can sign language, some of them can write, some of them can use text-to-speech devices. So it's a really awkward situation because it's not well broken up. The effort to break it up often puts people in a bad way one way or another.
Yeah. Yeah. So how have you found being a parent of a child with autism?
Honestly, for me, it's been great because it's a person who very much relates to me. So it's on a very personal level. I've actually always been close with my daughter than her mom was. Like from the time my daughter was a baby, she always related more than to her mom. And I want to be really clear: her mom nursed her. Her mother was a very loving and supportive and all of that. Just the child just always gravitated to me.
Yeah.
But it is a struggle dealing with with teachers and issues of bullying in school and things like that, because there's always an unspoken thing of like, why can't this child just be normal?
Yeah, there is.
And we've had sort of mixed results with schools. Some schools we chose to disclose the diagnosis, others we did not, depending on just how things were going. The concern is that there again, once the child's autistic, we're going to put them in the special needs class, and they're going to be years behind where they should be. Whereas, my daughter has been years ahead in reading and many other subjects for most of her life. So there was no reason to hold back academically like that.
Yeah. So what's her special talent? Because every person with autism has a special talent. We call it a superpower. So what's your daughter's superpower?
I'm not really fond of the term superpower, but in terms of special interests, she
Yeah.
really focuses on well. She loves history. She's always been really good with computers, and she's she can do like film theory, watch movies and patterns in cinema culture together really well. So she's got this whole broad cultural knowledge that's really impressive. She can like I'm interested in history as well, but she'll start going on about, for example, Eastern European 20th century politics. And, I'll get to a point. It's like, okay, I need you to slow down. I got to catch up. You've got ahead of me. So.
Yeah. I'm like that with my son. He's like a human calculator. He loves maths and loves numbers, and he's currently doing college level maths. And when he talks to me and his dad about, it's like, Lucas, I don't know anything about that, mate. I haven't studied that for. He's years ahead of where I was when I was at school. And obviously that's one thing we're struggling with at the moment, getting him into a school where it would help his talents in the best way.
Right.
So is that something you worry about, how your child is going to progress throughout her life, being dealt with by other people?
Definitely, yes. So what we did, she's actually 17. She's getting ready to start college soon. What we decided to do is we're doing an IT and information technology program.
Yeah.
And it's a shorter program, it's all remote. So if college doesn't work out, if she decides to take a break from it at any time, she will have a way to earn a living. And it's a way to earn a living. The IT field in America is a little bit of a haven for autistic and other neurodivergent people because it doesn't really rely heavily on those kinds of soft skills. It's all about learning the programs, learning the system.
Yeah. So it's really good that she has that plan. So she's obviously going off to college soon. So is that something you're worried about? She's going off to college. I'm presuming that means she's going to be moving away to go to college.
Not right away. The first couple of years she'll be going somewhere locally, and then after that she'll be moving away. And I mean it's a topic of concern. It's a stressful thing. But I think that's going to be true of any parent. And my attitude about it is, someone once told me, you give your child roots and you give them wings. You give them roots so they feel secure where they're from, and you give them wings to go where they want to go.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to let when a child gets to a certain age, you've got to be able to let them go. But then you're always going to be worried about them, and that doesn't stop. I think it is. It's true for any parent, regardless of disability or not. That's true for any parent. You're always going to worry about them. But then
it is. It is. I mean, it is something where I do feel very fortunate that she's going to be able to function as a person. She will be able to work. She will be able to hold a steady job. My father was never diagnosed, but in hindsight, he was clearly autistic, and he was never all functional in life. He struggled a lot with substance abuse. He struggled a lot with care of his home and things like that. Struggled with keeping steady jobs. So, and his parents were more or less really taking care of him for most of his life, and it was never quite clear what was going on. For a long time, he struggled with substance abuse, as many autistic people do. So everybody assumed that was the issue, but that was actually the symptom, not the cause.
Yeah. So obviously you've grown up in what sounds like it wasn't a very positive childhood. Sorry. So then you've taken that negative childhood and turned your life around, and then obviously become a parent with a child with autism and gone through all that process. What's that done to your mental health?
As a kid, it was a struggle because my mom and dad split up when I was pretty young, and my dad quit drinking when I was also pretty young, a few years after my parents split up.
Yeah.
So some of the relationship with my ex-wife, my daughter and I was mirrored in my mom, my dad and I, because I was more like my father on some fundamental levels. I really connected to him and related to him in a way that bothered my mom. So that was definitely a struggle growing up, and I carried a lot of anger over for a lot of years. I'll be honest, but at a certain point, when I was like 30 years old, it's like I have a kid I have to take care of. I have to take care of myself. I've just got this whole life I have to live. You just it's there, but it can't be the focus of life. You have to focus on the things you have to do, and I'm a lot happier for it.
Yeah. Is that something you're worried about your child displaying the same sort of behaviours as she gets older?
No, because I was always in her life, her mom and I were always able to sort of regulate each other's excesses even after we were divorced. And we never went through anything like alcoholism or anything that severely negative in the family. So while she is very much like me in some ways, she doesn't seem to have the sort of ambient anger that I did when I was a young man. And I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, and that is one of the. They do say that is one of the differences between boys and girls with autism. Is boys will display the anger, girls won't, because obviously girls have this ability to mask a lot of their autism signs. Is that something that you find with your daughter?
Not really. No, she's always been openly and sort of freely who she is as a person.
Yeah.
She did have some anger issues around the time that her mom and I got divorced, but I don't really attribute that to her being autistic. I just attribute that to mom and dad are getting divorced. It's a stressful, difficult time. It's I mean, it's always a challenge with when your child struggles, because there's the question of, is this just a normal life event, or is this something that's a symptom of what's going on? But in her case, and to some extent in my case, it was just a normal life event. I think one thing that a lot of people don't quite understand about autistic people is that because of some of the things we go through, there tends to be a lot of additional trauma that it's not a direct effect of being autistic. It's a direct effect of how other people react to and treat us. So and so there's a lot of, like I said before, there's a lot of substance, depression, anxiety, things like that come with it that aren't necessarily inherently a part of autism.
Yeah. So what would you say was the worst part of your daughter growing up? Because you said she's 17 now. So what was the worst part of your daughter growing up with autism, would you say?
I would say it was the way she struggled to relate to other people and how sort of sensitive other people were about it.
Yeah.
Because there were certain times when it would be, I'd be talking to a teacher or whoever, and this child relates to the world in this way. If you've just met the person, I can understand you might take them, say, not making eye contact as some sort of personal slight. But when you know this person has whatever issue it is they have, get over it. Like, I mean, I hate to be that sort of abrupt about it, but if someone doesn't make eye contact, then stop being mad about it, because it's not personal. That's just them.
Yeah.
And that was a real struggle, and it was a real struggle to see my kid go through that and have to constantly be explaining to the kid, like, you're not wrong. It's just, if you don't do certain things, people will make certain assumptions about you.
Yeah, so that was the worst bit, her being challenged for the way she was as a person.
Yes.
Yeah, because regardless of the autism, and you are just a normal person, just like everybody else. You just have these special abilities inside of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously you said that she likes history and she likes ICT. So What is it about those two subjects that she really loves?
I think it's the ability to sort of deep dive into it and to just really focus and learn everything about something. That seems to appeal to a lot of individuals. It doesn't automatically mean we all get along with each other. My dad's thing was not tying, and I mean I can tie my shoes, but that's about it. And so like he was always trying to make me do all these complicated knots. It's just like I don't have any all thumbs here. But yeah, I think it's just the ability to, and often with those kinds of subjects, you can be the only one in your circle who knows about a particular thing, and that can make socializing easier because if you have a question about it, you're the person they go to.
Yeah. Yeah. So is there a certain area of history that she likes? With me, it's always been the Tudors. So King Henry VIII and his wives and his children and things around that. That was always my favourite part of history.
She has a particular fascination with 20th century history, especially Eastern European and Soviet history.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I bet she can tell you lots about that maybe the history books don't even know.
Yeah, it's actually really, for me, it's been an education because I grew up in America at the end of the Cold War. I was in the 80s. So we're fed all of this propaganda about the Soviet Union. I'm still not a fan, but the history was a lot more complicated than I was led to believe as a kid. And the events going on, the politics world, there's a lot more happening on both sides of the ocean. So yeah, I learned a lot from her from that.
Yeah. And how have you both coped through the recent pandemic with all the changes that we had to go through?
It's been a struggle. Prior to the pandemic, I was always a person that would get my social experience by going where people were.
Yeah.
A coffee shop or something like that. And not being able to do that was a real challenge. And it was definitely a challenge for her. She dealt with a lot of depression. She dealt with a lot of isolation. Yeah, it was a hard time. I mean, it was a hard time for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about your daughter, but with my children, because obviously they both got autism, having that sudden change of one day they were at school and then next day is, we've got in lockdown, now you have to start doing Zoom calls and seeing your teacher on a computer screen, and they couldn't make that transaction smooth and simply like any other child. They had to have that few days to process the fact that they weren't allowed to go to school anymore. Was that a similar thing with your daughter?
Yes, it was. It didn't go particularly well. I mean, school was struggling, so school wasn't really able to accommodate what she needed. She's getting we call it a GED. It's a high school equivalency. She did not finish high school, and it just sort of is what it is. That's a situation where there was just no roadmap, and a couple of things that a lot of people don't understand about autistic people. One of them is that we thrive on routine and predictability, and we thrive on being able to somewhat make our own routine. So when everything goes completely haywire, like during the pandemic, and then on top of that, autistic people generally, not all, but many, additional symptoms of things like ADD or ADHD. And the problem with doing things electronically, at least, can be like you're on the computer, you're watching a teacher, and then a notification comes up that you got an email, and then Facebook does something, and then like there's all these other things that are happening, and especially for a child, it's very difficult to filter out all that noise that comes through on the internet and just stay on task.
Yeah. Children can be very distracted anyway, but when you add autism into the mix, it's extra frustrating for them. Yeah, I completely understand there. So what's your day-to-day life like with your daughter? So is there a certain degree of planning before you have to go out anywhere or anything like that?
To some extent, I try not to spring surprises on her. I don't. There again, we relate to each other pretty well. I understand not wanting to have my routine disrupted, not wanting any surprises. So, I think I have somewhat of an advantage over some other parents. I do understand the train of thought. I do understand that we have to make a plan. We have to, as much as possible, stick to the plan, and it goes pretty smoothly and pretty well. She lives with me more or less full time. She has regular visits with her mom. But when the arrangement started, it was a struggle because mom sort of had a hard time letting go, and so there were a lot of times sort of suddenly get an angry call from mom about this or that, and that was also toward the end of her time of attempting regular school. So there was a lot of stress there, but we managed to smooth things over with time.
Yeah. So how do you and your daughter deal with sudden changes happening? So such as the weather changing or your car breaking down or something like that. Just something that's all of a sudden out of the blue happening.
For me, I just take a couple of deep breaths and sort of make my new plan. She's learning to do that, but it clearly stresses her out.
Yeah. And how does she deal with that growing up?
She engaged in stimming behavior, which was a problem because one of her go-to stim behaviors was picking at scabs, which the way I dealt with that was by encouraging her to gave her like a stress ball, a squishy ball, so she could be doing something with her hands, or she couldn't have that, she could do something with her clothing, essentially anything but that. A lot of therapists who deal with autistic try to stop them stimming. It's a really bad thing to do because stimming it's stress relieving behavior. So if you stop them, then they're just building up more stress. So that's not good. And she was prone to severe tantrums, meltdowns. And what I started doing when she was about 5 years old was if I sort of saw it coming, you learn to detect signs of this is going to happen. I would try to remove her from the situation, and I would also say like, okay, let's stop. What are we trying to do? What do we need to accomplish? And sometimes just getting her out of the headspace of I'm upset and getting more and more upset and being focused on how upset she was would cause her to relax a little bit and want the worst of it.
Yeah. I mean, with us, it's not easy with my son to detect when he's going to go into meltdown or crisis. I mean, he can literally go from being okay to being 10, I'm completely stressed out and frustrated, throwing things, breaking things, kicking and punching, pretty much like that. It is hard with him. But with my daughter, there is a lot of you can tell when she's gonna. It's a lot of when she's in this crisis. It's go away, leave me alone. I'm in my bedroom, my space. Go away, sort of thing. Was that sort of similar thing with yours?
With her, there tended to be some build up to it. What you said reminded me when I was younger and undiagnosed, people would often comment on me having a quick temper, and it was always a little bit to me because it took a lot of provocation to set me off, at least from my point of view. But in hindsight, what it was because of differences in body language and communication style, people weren't picking up on these signs of this person is getting angry. Like I think most neurotypical people, if they're getting angry at you, you can usually spot it if you know how to.
Yeah.
Whereas with an autistic person, it's not that the signs aren't there; it's that you have to read their specific, like they have their own body language and their own behavior pattern that you really have to figure out, and it's not easy to do.
No, it's not easy, and that in itself can make you feel like you're a bit of a rubbish parent because then you're not picking up on those signs that your child needs you. Is that a similar thing with you?
Yes, particularly around the time of the divorce, it was a situation of trying to balance being there for the kid along with to establish my own life. And like when I started dating again, I had planned to tell my daughter that, until I was in a serious relationship, that she would meet the other person, and she figured it out. I mean, within a day. It was amazing. She just no law enforcement has the investigative capacities that she did at 8 or 9 years old, and I couldn't believe it. And but apparently she had a whole episode with mom after that because she was just stressed out by the change, and it was I felt terrible because it was I should have done something. I don't know exactly what, but I should have done something differently to cut that situation off.
Yeah. Yeah. So how have you found dating being as an autism dad?
I don't like the term autism dad very much for two reasons. One, if you're talking about focusing on the child, I prefer a parent of an autistic person just because it's focusing on the child, not on me. It's also an awkward term just because when you describe somebody as an autism parent, like are we saying the parent's autistic or are we saying of an autistic kid? As far as dating as a father of an autistic person, it's revealing. You learn a lot about people when you bring that into the conversation. A lot of people will dismiss you without any other information, don't want to deal with it, or they start making a lot of assumptions. And but I mean, to be honest, to me, that's just a case of trash taking itself out.
Yeah, definitely. Because obviously there is a lot of stigma around autism. There is still a lot of stigma. And some people just don't understand it, and they hear the word autism or autistic, and it's just, I don't want to deal with that. I don't know how to deal with that. I don't understand it. And they just, I'm not interested anymore, and blah, 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 and make their excuses and disappear, which is fine, because then you know that that's the wrong person. But then eventually the right person will come along. We have a question. What's your daughter like when it's other people's birthdays? Because our son, when he sees people getting exciting for birthdays that are not his, he doesn't like that. So what's your daughter like?
Birthdays in particular have never been an issue, other than just the general noise and number of people around can be overwhelming. She's never, I don't recall her ever having that problem. The family situation, though, when she was little, she was one of 9 cousins on her mother's side, and she was the littlest, and her mother was the last of her family to have kids. So there was a lot of attention on her at all times. So it may have just been a situation where, because she was getting so much attention all the time anyway, it didn't, that didn't have a chance to manifest. I don't truly know. Yeah.
So what is she like with her cousins?
She loves them. She adores her family. The family is generally pretty accepting. They really love the kid, so that's great.
Yeah, that is absolutely amazing that you've got that support network. Do you get on well with your ex-wife's family?
Not at all, but that's okay. I don't really have to see them. They're in another state from where I live, so.
Yeah, I mean, as long as they're okay with your child and her autism, I don't think that would bother you.
No, I mean, they don't have to like me, and I don't have to like them. It's all okay. One thing I can tell you from just the experience of going through divorce as a parent of an autistic kid, people a lot of times, when something like a divorce happens, they like to lie and try to paper things over. Just don't, because the autistic people in general, I can say, I can't speak for all of us, obviously, millions and millions of people, but I've never met a group of people who as uniformly hated being lied to, or who were as good at figuring it out. And one thing I remember, when my ex-wife remarried, my daughter was talking about her stepfather a lot. I sort of had this conversation with her that was, I'm glad you have a good relationship with this person, and I want you to have a good relationship with this person. I don't particularly want to hear about it. And when she asked me why, I said, I don't particularly like the guy. And my ex-wife was furious about it because she was there again. She was, oh, we're this big, happy, still friends with my ex-husband, et cetera, et cetera. But after I did that, my daughter actually acted with her stepfather a lot better, a positive relationship with him after the fact. I think she was just picking up that something was off about the situation and not knowing what that was bothering her and causing her to act out.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're showing your daughter that not everybody likes each other, but you can still be civilized, because at the end of the day, you and your ex-wife share a child. So you're always going to be in their life.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, one of the big challenges that a lot of autistic people face is we don't get along well socially. Is there is a tendency to want to be a people pleaser. There's a tendency to want to try to get along with everybody else, and it's important that the kid know from a young age we don't all have to have the same interests. We don't all have to be best friends. We don't all have to want to talk to each other all the time, but we do sort of support and respect each other. And as long as you can do that, you're really golden, I think.
Yeah, and you know what? And that's a brilliant message to end on. The fact that it's okay to not like each other, but to be civilized. But the fact that children know mum and dad love them, and that's never going to change. That's
right.
That's all that matters. You've been an absolutely amazing guest. Thank you for giving me a dad's perspective on having a child with special needs. Please tune in tomorrow morning, 11 o'clock. Reboot with Claire is on. I'm going to be joining Claire. The baby warriors, as Adam now calls us, are going to reunite on MH Warrior TV. So stay tuned for that tomorrow morning. See you later.